say ahead of this session that I've been navigating the agency landscape for close to 20 years. The last 5 specifically in a retail media capacity. So it's really important for us to be able to surface these conversations with the rest of you as we go to market increasingly with different RMNs, different brands, and some of the questions seem to be the same. So it's really useful for us to have this dialogue with some of the industry leaders. So from me, a massive thank you to you all for joining. I think we're just going to kick things off with a very broad question. So what are you most excited about with the evolution of retail media and the role it plays in the wider marketing mix? And where do you see the big potential for you and all your clients? I'll just go down the line here. That's one for you all. Luis.
All right, thanks, Uche. So,
no problem.
I think last year was all about solidifying what retail media was for brands, for advertisers, for publishers, for agencies. This year is all about connected commerce, basically, and blending the online and offline. I think that's what's really exciting about this year. I think it's that evolution into really unleashing the power of the data and what you can do, outside of, a marketplace and really into the world out there, out of the digital world.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, I'd echo a similar theme. I'd phrase it as, I guess I'm excited for retail media really cracking that sort of brand media mainstream, sitting at that top table in terms of those brand budget discussions. I think it's happening in pockets at the moment. I think Amazon have done a pretty good job on their offering. I think Prime Video's doing it, but there's so much more potential in terms of scaling retail CTV, the digital offsite, the in-store pieces, and also how we use retail-derived insights and measurement to enable that.
Fantastic. Yes?
Not to bang on the same note, but I think connected commerce is definitely an area that we're focusing on as well, and it's really exciting to see the channel silos being broken down now. So how we integrate different channels is a really kind of big key piece for us that I think we're seeing better measurement solutions and better planning around. But for me personally, I think what's really exciting is the digitalisation of in-store. We know 70% of transactions still happen in that environment, so it's a really important touch point for us to kind of really consider within our plans. So how we see shopper, trade and brands start working together is really exciting for us.
It's a great shout. Matt?
Yeah, it's probably no surprise, I agree, with all three of these guys here. I think retail media is a fundamental change to the media landscape, and ultimately I think the most exciting thing is it gives brands the opportunity to use data at every single point within the journey and any single moment of interaction, I guess, with the customer. So yeah, I think that's exciting. There's no channels really that can claim to do that in the same breadth or depth that retail media can.
And I think we echo that sentiment from SMG in terms of the excitement around retail media. So that's a great way to start off the panel. What I'd like to do now is maybe take a step back and think about how we would define where agencies are truly with the adoption of retail media. Matthew, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to that question, I would say. The first part, I will say, from an agency perspective, I think we are adopting it as much as we can for our clients. I think we work really hard to do the best work that we can for any one of our clients, I'm sure. And that a lot of the time is dictated by their own maturity as well and budgets, if we're completely honest with it. But I think we're well on our way to really developing these full funnel retail media propositions. The second part of the question that I'd kind of ask back to any retail media network that is in the room is, where are retail media networks at engaging with agencies? Because it's a very different way of working. It's a different way to engage with customers when traditionally they're so used to working directly with brands. So I think if we had a retail media network on stage, that's what I'd be asking them as well from that.
Fantastic. Luis, from a Group M perspective?
Yeah, I think similar to echo what you were saying, I think it's almost like a two-piece approach on this, or two-part. From a stack perspective, I think network agencies are pretty much there. I think we have invested a lot of time acquiring, developing the right solutions. So there's definitely, we're full in, I think, but it's a journey, right? So similarly, there's the retail media network and their capabilities, right, that continue to evolve, and we need to lower the barrier of entry in many areas there, you know. Price is one that I think is important when you think about media investments. And the other one is actually your clients, the advertisers, right? The famous brand and budgets and trade budgets is very much there still.
Yeah.
And I think it's really for us as agencies to help them and partner with the retail media networks to really talk about that connected commerce and experience and omni-channel, right? So I think, to summarize, we're all in. I think this year, like I said before, is the year that we need to really start breaking those barriers, right? And basically take our clients in that journey, because not everybody's at the same, you know, stage at this point.
Yeah. Maturity is huge, right, across different retail media networks. And I think from our perspective, just maybe with so much proliferation in the market, it's quite hard to get an agency's attention, right? So I wonder, what do retail media networks, new entrants into the market, have to do to get an agency's engagement or indeed endorsement? I talk about being sticky, being noisy, but maybe we could talk to what does a new retail media network entrant into the market have to do to engage an agency? Ian?
Yeah, so I think if the retail media network, if the core of it is an on-site retail media proposition that serves endemic brands and delivers strong returns, you'll always get an agency's attention because brands will look to flow budget through those channels. I think where you're nodding out with the question is going bigger than that, and I think to go bigger than that, really, I'd focus on two parts. The first would be the retail media network having a real deep understanding of what is unique about their data assets and what value add that will bring to our clients, bearing in mind their direct competitors doing similar things. And second to that, I'd say, I guess similar to Matt's point, the way that they approach and work with agencies. So where we do our best work is with the retail media networks that really lean in, look to integrate with our tech and tools, and actually look to do data integrations in parts as well. And I think if you can really get those two bits running, then you'll definitely have the agency's attention.
Yeah, that tech integration is powerful. Luis?
I think what I would add to what has been discussed already is even within the retail media network, especially if you are a retailer, connecting the dots with your retail teams. So what I mean by that is that, you know, it's a new area that is basically setting a proposition on something that has been very well established, sometimes over 100 years. So how do you make sure that your sales teams really understand the value that you bring with your advertising proposition? I think connecting that will really help, and telling that story, you know, as one unit will be, you know, really advantageous for the clients, for the agencies, to really drive that adoption.
Mr. Higgins.
Yeah, and I think as these guys have alluded to, we'll all test new retail media networks, new placements for all of our clients and our brands. That's our job, that's our role, that's what we do. I would say as like a little bit of maybe a plea to new retail media networks is it's a value exchange. So be honest, be accountable for the performance. We're not going to build relationships if you come in and promise the earth and then you have to explain why it didn't deliver. So yeah, it's make it accountable, make it comparable to other retail media propositions. But yeah, all retail media networks have our attention. Keeping it is down to your accountability to it.
I think that's fair in most aspects of what we do. To be moving on, just how are agencies evolving their strategies for engaging retail media networks, and how does this differ from your traditional publisher relationships? Jess?
So I think for us, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach with any of the partnerships that we have in market. We obviously know that the Amazons and the Googles of the world are in a very different maturity state to some of the retailers that we work with, particularly those new entrants to the market. What we look within those partnerships is to really drive value for the partners, something that drives value for the brands, and to give differentiation between how we show up against other agencies as well. But some of that is like really kind of like how we develop those partnerships on like a level that's helping us be an accountable partner to retailers. They're on a very different journey than what we are with the rest of the publishers in a different state. So data is kind of BAU for us, and making sure that we can show retailers how we can use it in a really tangible way that's going to drive growth for them and have that value back and value exchange to how they want to work. But also it's really kind of about setting up best practice and what you were kind of referring to there about like promising the world and delivering. It's like the really non-sexy stuff that doesn't get headlines, but important to just have the basics right and have a really strong working relationship with our retailers about being operationally set up, like office hours and getting the right processes down. So when we are scaling those networks, we're in a really kind of strong, positive place to do that. But where we are now versus where we are when we launched the first agency partnerships in 2023 with Tesco and Sainsbury's is a very different conversation, and we're having much more mature conversations about what we do with that data, how we co-build, how we lean into what's really unique about the retailers. And I think that's what's kind of really interesting in the position that we're at right now is like how do we like jointly show up to brands in encouraging how they grow and how they drive growth within those retailer environments in a way that is kind of really tangible to the like uniqueness of the retailer that we're working with.
Luis, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. It's really about, in a way, they are publishers, right? Like we need to treat them the same way we treat the other publishers. It's exciting to see, things that we're doing in that area when it comes to having joint business plans with them, joint goals that are a forcing function to put these things in place in terms of transparency, measurement, engagement, and SLAs. So to me, really, these are publishers, and we need to treat them as those partners, right? It's the new generation of the data and insights that we can bring. And what is really exciting is that it covers the whole funnel, right? You start from performance-driven all the way to how do you influence your brand message based on consumer behavior. So definitely, it's a partner, right? It's a publisher.
Fantastic, and I think that there were a couple of references there to measurement. So I think, and across the day, across the 2 days, I'm sure we hear lots of, references back to measurement, standardization, etc. From an agency perspective, what are we seeing as the biggest challenges in terms of dealing with retail media networks? I know it's a question that you get asked a lot. I'll start with you again, Jessica.
So yeah, standardization for me is like a particular point that I like really kind of drive value with. We did a piece of work with ISBA a few years ago about driving best practice, and that launched guidance for retailers about how they do an iterative process to standardization and how they can really kind of like drive value. But with how fragmented the market is and how many retail media networks there are, it's always going to be a little bit of a challenge. But I think there's been some really positive steps in this space. The IAB have launched their gold certification for retailers, and I think we are starting to see the mark move on it, which is really kind of nice. But what brands really ultimately want to see is really like transparent data. They want to understand like what the definition is behind the metrics that they're using, and really be able to kind of cross-compare like where's driving the most growth. So standardization is kind of is a point of contention personally for me, but it's nice to see like how the industry has evolved into leaning into it.
Fantastic. Mr. Black.
Yeah, no, definitely echo the fragmentation point. I think it's well made. There are simply too many retail media networks versus the size and scale of the agencies trying to, work with them and partner with them, and then you layer on top of that all of the different tech vendors that they each work with. It becomes almost unmanageable. So that's a clear challenge. I think the build I would make is around the flexibility within the retail media networks. So giving agencies the ability to change attribution settings, for example, to be creative with how we work with our clients to use retail media networks, and also the interoperability. So how can retail media networks work together? It's a contentious point because they each have their unique data assets. There's reams of consent challenges that would need to be worked through. But really those two areas are where I see us unlocking the true potential that retailers can give when working with agencies.
Mr. Higgins.
Yeah, so when you gave us the heads up that this question would come, I thought the best thing to do is ask our team, what are their biggest pet peeves? Some of the team are actually around in the audience today, so I appreciate them coming and supporting through the madness. there were some really common themes that came through with the guys that are in the platforms like day to day. Standardization, a little bit that Jess mentioned. Even to the points of like semantics, like we're calling something units or sales or conversions or baskets. Does it matter? Like, can we just standardize the language and can we all just be clear on what that is? And then another challenge is simply, our team need to log in and make decisions based on the data that they're seeing. Simple functions, not being able to pull reports by day, for example, like that should be commonplace. Or even just the data not updating. Like that's a big challenge. Like logging into a platform and I see it weekly, our team's asking like, oh, is everyone seeing the same challenges in data not updating, etc. And it just needs to be better, to be completely honest, for us to do what we do best. And I guess that's it really. It's like, make sure the foundations are there before we start building the second floor, basically. They're just the pet peeves of my team, I guess.
No problem. I think those are fair considerations. Jess, I wonder, moving on to one of our favorite topics of discussion, the in-store digitization, and we're seeing a huge push across all retail media networks towards this. Where does in-store digitization sit within your total planning process? And how serious are you as agencies taking this new opportunity?
It's a really interesting question because as we talk about connected commerce, like I say, 70% of transactions are still done in store. It's a really important touch point that we should be considering. There's, I think, kind of multiple different ways of looking at it though. So if we consider how we approach it as Omnicom, if we look at proximity to store out of home within our total plan, that's something that we do BAU, encourage all of our clients to do anyway, and considering that with how we creatively target people as well as how we target people across different locations. So that's kind of a bit of a standard for us, but how it's evolving and how it's becoming more digital, it just brings some really unique opportunities to market about how we become a lot more targeted and measure that in a way that's more effective within the in-store environment, and really how we join the dots between how we do that with the rest of the media that we're kind of planning across the board and full funnel. So for us, it's definitely a big opportunity that we're kind of watching closely. And I think from a brand perspective, it's a really nice way of speaking to the customer in a slightly different way in an environment where they're very close to the point of purchase. So how we can show up creatively to those touch points, I think is going to be really important to how we speak to brands.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think you mentioned the funnel there. So I have a question for Luis and Ian. How important is retail media in the funnel, and how are your agencies embracing retail media as a tool or a lever to unlocking kind of top of funnel budgets, and what are those conversations currently?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely the strategic bet this year. As I mentioned before, it's the power of the data allows you to really understand how you translate consumer sentiment into a brand message, right? And at the same time, it's highly performing data that basically eliminates wastage in many ways. So it is something that we are definitely fully lean in, and we want to ensure that it's integrated in everything that we do. We have seen very early success last year in some of the testing we've done, and this year we're tripling, quadrupling our efforts there, right? It was one of our biggest predictions this year, right? And breakthrough week, it was really retail media is here to stay. It will be larger than other budgets, including AV budgets. So it's definitely a strategic bet.
Ian?
Yeah, so I think when you talk about full funnel retail media, I nodded to this earlier, but I think you have to acknowledge that Amazon have cracked this to an extent, and agencies, all of our agencies here will be doing this at scale already with that retailer. So I think really where we're evolving is to do that with the other retailers, of which of course there are several, and I think that's where you've got more intricacies in terms of the tech stacks, you've got the in-store component, which the pure players don't have, and I think where we're probably honestly at now is that it happens to an extent. I think there are a lot of great sort of omni-channel executions, primarily in the CPG, health and beauty, a bit in consumer electronics, but we're not quite there yet at that sort of stage where it's cracked that AV mainstream. It's a core planning consideration for always on, And I think, I think we'll get there, but I think that's probably an honest assessment of where full funnel is at as it stands.
And it's fair, right? Everyone's leaned in, so that's the main thing, that we're all leaned in and having these open conversations. I've been given the nod, so we've got one final question. If we're sitting here in 12 months' time, what's the one thing that you will predict will have changed for agencies when it comes to retail media? I'll start that end now.
So in 12 months' time, I'm going to assume we've all successfully navigated LHF and everything that's coming in the end of this year, and that's kind of been put to bed. But other than that, I think some of the more multi-channel, omni-channel, in-store pieces of activity will just become more commonplace. So we've seen some brilliant showcases. I know John Lewis were on stage earlier and they did a fantastic showcase. That will just start to become more BAU, I think, and we'll see that more prominent in the market.
Fantastic. Jess?
For me, I think there's three big things that we're kind of watching. The first is how different categories are entering the retail media market and launching new platforms. And I think from a learning perspective, that's going to be really key for us about how we build out different measurement models. It's very mature in grocery right now, but where we see the luxury space enter into this and fashion, the shopping behaviour is very different. So I expect to see more learnings, more insights about how we build out best practice at a total level from a retail media perspective. I think AI is a big one to watch as well. We're in a very fragmented place, and I think we're going to see that develop in a really rapid way about how we get quicker insights and how we build up better kind of measurement models, utilising that as a tool to enable it. And then the third thing, I think a big thing for us is we talk about connected commerce, and we can show up in the most connected way as we like as agencies, but it has to be replicated and mirrored on a brand side as well. And when it's not, it just doesn't function. So we've seen from a consultancy perspective, it be a really kind of key theme about how brands can be more connected and organisational structures. So I expect to see some more insights and better learnings around best practice from an organisational setup point of view as well.
Ian?
Yeah, I think agencies are going through literally a huge transformation to support the growth of retail media. If you look at the sort of RFPs that we get through now, particularly from some of the larger brands in the CPG space, it's right at that top table consideration. And that's really sort of caught the eyes and ears of the top brass in the agencies. And I think as a result of that, we're probably all going through quite significant restructurings to really unleash the power that retail media can offer. We at Publicis are training literally hundreds of our planning team members to be able to use retail insights and to learn about retail measurement and to be able to plan retail media as effectively as they have been AV or your sort of biddable channels for years. And I think a year from now, it'd be so interesting to see where that's got to. And I think what we'll see a lot more is these kind of big creative executions, talking a lot more about the work we've done rather than the potential of the channel.
So at Essence MediaCom, we're very bullish, right? We just released our predictions for the year, and we said that basically retail media will overtake traditional AV budgets, right, in terms of growth and lion's share. I think you guys basically touched base on all the levers that will allow us to do that, but we truly believe in 12 months you will see this as a more established channel where people feel more comfortable including this in every single strategy that they make. That's what we're seeing right now in the briefs that we get, and I think the behavior and the mental muscle that we're developing with our data planners, our strategies, and with the brands kind of validate where we see that prediction.
It's fantastic. It's just for me to say thank you all once again for helping shape this journey. It's been a pleasure working with you across the past 4 or 5 years, and I look forward to next year as well, where we'll sit down and celebrate some of our wins. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.